That Christmas night seemed straight out of a movie. The lights twinkled on the porch, the smell of cinnamon and roast turkey filled the house, and the cheerful voices of the family echoed amidst laughter and Christmas carols. Everything seemed perfect, at least on the outside. There was a tree full of golden ornaments, carefully wrapped presents, and a lavish table worthy of a photograph. But amidst all that brilliance, there was something silent, almost invisible, a cold distance between the people who should love each other. While everyone chatted about travel, business, and gifts, I observed, there was a subtle disconnect, as if Christmas had lost its soul. The children played oblivious. The adults exchanged compliments disguised as comparisons, and the clinking of glasses seemed to conceal unspoken truths. That Christmas night, amidst laughter and colorful gifts, I didn't know that the simplest present would reveal just how lost our family had become. My gaze wandered to the twinkling lights of the tree, and it was there that I realized something. Christmas had become a stage, and everyone was playing a role. The generous one, the grateful one, the proud one. But no one seemed sincere, not even me. Inside, something told me that this would be the last Christmas in which we would pretend to be happy. Cameras could capture the luxury, but they would never show the emptiness. And it is precisely in this contrast, between the glitz and the silence, that the real story begins. The room was filled with a familiar warmth, the kind you believe will last forever. The table gleamed under the yellowish light of the chandelier, covered with carefully arranged plates, polished silverware, and bowls that reflected the glow of the candles. The aroma of roast turkey and freshly cut panettone mingled with the soft sound of Christmas music playing in the background. It was the perfect image of a family Christmas, at least the kind of perfection that appears in photos, not necessarily the one felt in the heart. My mother-in-law paced back and forth, adjusting details that were already perfect. My father-in-law told the same old story about the family's first Christmas, and everyone laughed as if it were something new. The children, anxious, looked at the tree as if expecting a miracle to emerge from under the presents. Each one seemed to be playing a rehearsed role: the host, the joker, the grateful one, the distracted one. Everything followed the script of a cow. Happy night. Everyone was laughing, toasting, and I thought it would just be another family Christmas. I looked at the clock and saw the hand approaching midnight. It was the most anticipated moment, the exchange of gifts. The atmosphere filled with expectation, as if the value of family love were measured by the size of the packages under the tree. Fake smiles widened, and each glance carried a mixture of curiosity and competition. There was something almost theatrical about that joy. I watched in silence, trying to convince myself it was just the Christmas spirit, but deep down I realized it was something else, a search for approval, for status, for showing who loved more, who gave the best gift. At that table, love seemed to have been replaced by appearances. My son's laughter, innocent and pure, broke the whirlwind of my thoughts. He was the only one there who truly believed in Christmas, and perhaps that was precisely why, minutes later, what happened would mark him forever. The countdown echoed through the room. 3, 2, 1, and in a joyful chorus, everyone shouted, "Merry Christmas!" The music grew louder, the lights on the tree twinkled festively, and, as if in a sacred ritual, the presents began to be distributed. The children's laughter mingled with the rustling of colorful confetti. It was a celebration of consumption disguised as love. My son, sitting near the tree, gazed curiously at the packages bearing his name. Suddenly, my mother-in-law appeared with an enormous package, adorned with a shimmering red ribbon. The weight of the gift already hinted at something grand inside. Her eyes overflowed with pride. "Look, dear, Grandpa and Grandma brought something very special for you." The boy opened the package, and before him appeared what any child would dream of having: the new video game console, the most expensive, the most desired. The sparkle in his eyes was genuine, pure, innocent. He jumped for joy, hugged his grandparents, and began to shout with happiness. But while everyone laughed and clapped, something inside me broke. The invisible camera of consciousness focused on my face, still, silent, observing. In that joy there was something twisted. It wasn't just a gift. It was a message. They never realized that the gift wasn't for my son. It was a message for me. The glances exchanged between my in-laws spoke volumes. They knew what they were doing. The generous gesture had a purpose: to show who truly supported the dreams of that household. It was a silent reminder that the power lay in their hands, not mine. I swallowed my pride. I felt the bitter mixture of humiliation and helplessness rise in my throat. My son was smiling innocently, and I couldn't ruin that moment. Not for him. So I disguised my discomfort with a mechanical smile. I applauded, thanked them, and even took pictures, as if that moment were worthy of being remembered. But inside me, a flame ignited, and that same night, unknowingly, my in-laws gave me the last gift I would accept from them, the courage to do something that no one expected. After the initial euphoria of those present, the sound of the party faded into the air, as if something invisible had stolen the brilliance of that night. The music still played, but it seemed distant. The laughter now sounded forced, and the gazes, once full of excitement, began to avert from one another. It was as if everyone sensed, without saying it, that something had changed. An invisible thread of unease ran through the room. My father-in-law raised his glass, trying to rekindle the mood. "Family is the greatest gift of all," she said, smiling. But that toast felt hollow. My son played with the console, still in its box, beaming, while the others watched with expressions feigning approval. I tried to appear calm, but the weight of the moment crushed me from the inside. It was more than an expensive gift. It was a display of power, a public reminder of who could do more. The conversation continued, but the flavor of the dinner changed. The words became cautious. The jokes sounded out of place. Even the clinking of cutlery against the plates seemed louder, more bothersome. At that moment, I realized their generosity had a price, and that price was respect. While everyone laughed at something I didn't quite hear, I found myself watching my son. He still didn't understand the game the adults were playing around him. To him, it was all innocence, an incredible gift, a gesture of love. But to me, it was a wound. The console gleamed on the table like a trophy of submission. My wife tried to break the silence by asking if everything was all right. I responded with a short smile. There was nothing to say. There was no fight, no direct insult, but there was a humiliation disguised as affection, the most painful of all. The dinner ended without arguments, but with a profound absence of truth. Each person said goodbye with hugs that seemed like greetings from strangers. I also thanked them as I always did. But this time, as I closed the door behind them, I felt something different, a cold, almost calculated calm. That night had taught me something. The worst form of manipulation is the one that disguises itself as kindness. And at that moment, I decided that I would never again allow my family's love to be bought. That night, the silence of the house seemed louder than any words spoken during dinner. The sound of the wrapping paper tearing still echoed in my mind, like a persistent reminder of all that gesture truly meant. I sat in the living room, alone, watching the illuminated tree. The lights blinked at perfect intervals, but for some reason they seemed sad, perhaps because I was too. As I looked at the brand new console in my son's hands, I started to wonder what that gift represented. Was it truly an act of love, or just a way to reaffirm power, status, control? A gift can be a form of control, a reminder of who's in charge, or a chance to break free. These words resonated within me like a revelation. I realized that for years I had accepted gifts that came laden with hidden intentions, help, favors, gestures of kindness that deep down demanded something in return. Obedience, eternal gratitude, submission disguised as respect. I began to understand that the value of a gift is not in its price, but in the freedom it carries. There are gifts that liberate and others that imprison. There are those born of love and those born of pride. And that night, it became clear that what my in-laws had given my son was not just a toy. It was a silent message from someone who wanted to remember who truly sustained the joy in the house. The weight of that realization hit me hard. I looked around and saw how many expensive and beautiful things filled that home. But I also realized what was missing, a true sense of generosity, a gesture that springs from the soul and not from vanity. As the clock ticked down the final hours of Christmas, something inside me began to shift. I knew I couldn't erase what had happened, but I could decide what to do with it. And for the first time, I felt a strange peace, as if the pain had shown me a new path. Ultimately, perhaps the greatest gift anyone can give is that of give up, not the one about accumulating. It was already late into the night when everyone went to sleep. Only the twinkling lights on the tree remained, and the silence of the room was broken only by the distant sound of a cold wind rustling against the windows. I sat down again, observing the remnants of the party, forgotten glasses, crumbs on the tablecloth, wrapping paper scattered on the floor. It all seemed like the scene of something that had ended beautifully, but not truly. I picked up my half-empty glass of wine, and for a moment thought of toasting myself, not to Christmas, but to the clarity that had finally arrived. That night had shown me exactly what I already knew but pretended not to see. Respect cannot be bought, and love cannot be measured in gifts. I got up and went to the office. There, in a drawer I rarely opened, was a brown envelope. Inside it, a document I had kept for months, something that represented more than just a piece of paper, an act of freedom. I felt its weight in my hands and realized that there was my answer, the true gift that I had not yet given. That night, I also had something to offer, but it wasn't what they expected. As I held the envelope, a whirlwind of thoughts coursed through me. I could leave everything as it was, keep up appearances, continue being the obedient son-in-law, the father who accepts silence as peace. But something within me no longer fit that role. The wound of that humiliation had awakened something greater, the need to act, not out of anger, but out of justice, to restore to life the balance that pride had destroyed. I looked out the window and saw the snow falling gently on the garden. Each flake seemed like a new chance. I took a deep breath and realized that decision wasn't about revenge, it was about starting over. What was inside that envelope would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone. I carefully folded the document, put it back in the envelope and left it on the table. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, I would deliver my gift, and it wouldn't come wrapped in ribbons or gold paper, but in courage. The following morning arrived enveloped in a serene chill. The sun timidly filtered through the curtains, reflecting off the decorations still hanging from the previous night. The house was silent, but carried that heavy air of something still unresolved. I woke before everyone else, drank coffee in silence, and looked again at the envelope on the table. I knew that this would be a day no one would forget. When the family began to gather again for breakfast, the atmosphere seemed normal. The children were still talking about their presents. My son was showing off his new game console, and the adults were exchanging comments about dinner, trying to rebuild the artificial harmony. I, however, felt my heart beating at a different rhythm. It was time. I stood up calmly and asked for everyone's attention. The murmuring ceased and all eyes turned to me. Yesterday everyone gave their gift. Today it's my turn. I held the envelope firmly. The sound of the paper being opened cut through the air. For a moment no one understood what was happening. I read in a firm and calm voice the words I had rehearsed so many times in my mind. While everyone was celebrating, I announced, the house was no longer ours. It now belonged to a charity. The silence was absolute. Time seemed to stand still. My wife put her hand to her mouth, incredulous. My son looked at me, confused, not understanding what not being ours anymore meant. My father-in-law, who until then had seemed unshaken, paled. My mother-in-law, motionless, gripped her coffee cup so tightly that her fingers trembled. No one said anything. The sound of the clock on the wall was the only thing filling the void of that revelation. But, inside me, there was a peace I hadn't felt in years. I explained calmly. The house would be sold, and the money donated to an institution that cared for abandoned children. It wasn't an act of madness. It was a choice of value. I wanted to show that what they used to measure power could, in fact, be used to heal lives. My father-in-law tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out, and for the first time he seemed small in my presence. My son, without understanding the gravity of the moment, simply said innocently, "So other children will be able to play there too." It was at that moment that I realized he understood more about the true meaning of Christmas than all of us put together. For a few seconds no one moved. The silence was so heavy it seemed to fill every corner of the room, until suddenly it was broken, not by calm words but by a scream. "Have you gone mad?" roared my father-in-law, slamming his hand on the table so hard that the cups trembled. The sound echoed like thunder. My mother-in-law began to cry, not from true sadness, but from indignation. Between sobs, she said that I had destroyed everything they had built, that I was ungrateful, irresponsible. Each tear seemed an attempt to erase the shame she felt, not for the loss of the house, but for the loss of control. My wife looked at me, not knowing what to say. There was shock, fear, and something new, perhaps a glimmer of wonder. The little one, confused, hid behind her, clutching the console in his hands as if trying to protect the only piece of security he understood. My father-in-law yelled. My mother-in-law cried, but for the first time I felt free. I remained silent. There was nothing to justify. This wasn't revenge, it was liberation. What I did wasn't to hurt, but to heal, to show that true value lies not in the walls that shelter us, but in the actions that define us. My father-in-law paced back and forth, distraught, repeatedly saying that I had thrown away years of sacrifice. But deep down he knew. What bothered him wasn't the donation, it was the fact that I had made a decision without asking permission. The invisible hierarchy he had maintained for years had crumbled with a single gesture. My mother-in-law tried to intervene, asking me to reconsider, saying that it could be fixed. I calmly replied, "There's nothing to fix. The house was given to us, and with it everything that bound us." From that point on, the chaos turned to silence once more. A different kind of silence, one of surrender. My in-laws seemed smaller, the house seemed bigger, and I felt my heart light, as if the weight of years had finally dissolved. While they mourned the loss of what they considered essential, I saw what I had truly gained: peace, the freedom of owing nothing to anyone. And in that instant, I realized something I will never forget. Some screams aren't of anger. They're the sound of a structure collapsing. And sometimes, everything needs to fall apart so that the truth can finally breathe. After the chaos came the silence, not the uncomfortable silence that precedes an argument, but the silence that remains when everything has been said, when the truth finally prevails. I looked at the still-lit Christmas tree, its lights twinkling on a floor covered in torn papers and broken mementos. It was strange how something so simple could contain so much symbolism. The glow that once represented joy now illuminated the beginning of a new life. I sat down and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. There was no longer the pressure of proving anything to anyone, nor the weight of owing gratitude where only control existed. I had broken the invisible chains that bound me, not only to that house, but to the fear of displeasing, of being judged, of not being good. Enough. Sometimes to teach the value of what is right, it is necessary to give up what is precious. Those words echoed within me. The world teaches that losing is weakness, but in truth, there are victories that are only achieved when you have the courage to let go. That act wasn't about destroying, but about rebuilding. By donating the house, I didn't lose a home. I restored meaning to what it should represent: shelter, sharing, generosity. My son, still not understanding everything, approached and asked, "Dad, where are we going to live now?" I knelt before him and replied with a calm smile, "Wherever there is love, my son, because a house is made of walls, but a home is made of people. Christmas is not about what we receive, but about what we are able to give." It was at that moment that I realized the true purpose of that night. Christmas didn't need luxury, expensive gifts, or grand gestures. It only needed sincerity. And if, somehow, that extreme gesture served to open the eyes of those who always confused power with love, then it would all have been worthwhile. I had donated more than a house. I had donated an example. And as I watched my son smile, I understood that the legacy I would leave him would not be material, but moral. Faith, character, and the freedom to live with a pure heart. Night fell again, and the house, now silent, seemed to breathe a new air. The Christmas lights still twinkled, but their glow was not the same. Perhaps because this time they reflected not luxury, but rather sense. I walked through the rooms, observing every detail: the photos on the walls, the smell of coffee that still lingered in the air, the distant sounds of the city outside. Everything seemed the same, but inside me, everything had changed. That day I realized that freedom has a price, and it's high, but nothing compares to the value of living it in peace. By giving up what was ours, I gained something that can't be bought: a clear conscience, a light heart, and the certainty of having taught something that no gift could teach. They gave a toy, I taught a lesson. Gestures may seem small, but they reveal who we are. While many seek the power to impress, few understand the power of inspire. Donating that house wasn't an act of rebellion, it was an act of faith, a silent way of saying that dignity lies not in what we possess, but in what we are capable of achieving. Give up for what we believe in. I thought of my son, who observed everything with curious eyes and a pure heart. One day he would understand that this choice was made by him, so that he would never confuse generosity with submission, and learn that true love is that which gives without expecting anything in return. And you? What was the most difficult gift you ever gave someone? Perhaps it was forgiveness. Perhaps it was letting go. Or like me, perhaps it was the act of giving up in order to teach what truly matters. Life always presents us with choices that test who we are. Some hurt, but all shape us. What I did that morning didn't destroy my family. It only revealed who was truly willing to love. Comment below what you would have done in this situation, and share this video so that more people understand the true meaning of giving. And so, amidst tears, silence, and one last look at the tree, I realized Christmas is not a date, it's an awakening.